Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this meeting, organised by MP Watch. So, I'm going to start by just giving you a bit of information about who MP Watch are. There's the right one.
At MP Watch, we believe that we can change the way that we deal with the climate and nature crisis by engaging with our political system.
But so far, Parliament has failed us.
We think that net zero should be the basis of everything we do as a country.
And we work directly with MPs as constituents, asking them to partner with us to address the crisis we face.
During the general election, we campaigned tirelessly to raise the climate emergency in the political agenda.
Working with Lord David, the recent chair of the Climate Change Committee,
we organised local meetings where he shared his insights on the crisis with the public.
We also ran a high-profile campaign
to find the best climate candidates.
Those were selected by a panel of the great and good,
including Professor Mike Berners-Lee,
Brian Eno,
and Baroness Boycott,
as well as members of our own network.
Meanwhile, in constituencies, local group members work non-stop to encourage and challenge candidates, showing how much we care about climate and environment.
We used every legal means at our disposal,
including Morris dancing.
With the new Parliament, the game has changed.
Many climate deniers lost their seats, but still many new MPs just aren't well enough informed on how urgent the situation really is.
And that's why we've launched this new campaign.
Working with top climate scientists, preparing written briefings for MPs.
Written in plain English.
These provide unbiased information of the net zero aspects of bills going through Parliament.
This way, we hope to counter the spin and disinformation being spread by the wealthy fossil fuel lobby,
making for better evidence-based policy that suits the needs of people in this country.
But this is a David and Goliath fight, and we urgently need your financial support.
To help build our network, to engage with more top scientists,
and produce media and films to get our message across.
Help us to change the way we deal with climate and nature
by changing Parliament.
One MP at a time.
Thank you.
This evening we've got guests from the Environment Agency on my left, and here we have, let me get this right, Paul Olenik and Joseph Leonard from the Flood Resilience team. On my right, Simon Hunter, who is CEO of Bristol Avon Rivers Trust. And on the far end is Jim Dale, who's an expert meteorologist, author, TV personality,
exaggeration,
and a few other things. And Jim is going to kick off.
Yeah, thanks. Good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. First, thank you, David, for the invite. Thank you, Heather, for the lovely dinner that you cooked for us this evening. Otherwise, I'd have been starving. I am just a little bit about me, so you know where I'm coming from. I am a meteorologist. First of all, in the Royal Navy. It was fantastic to go around the world to places like South Georgia and follow Shackleton's steps and all of that sort of stuff. But I sort of cut my teeth as a very young boy. I kind of feel the weather, and that sounds a bit crazy, but it's one of those things that if you've got a little hobby and you think that's you, that's what your life is. Well, the weather and feeling the weather, feeling the rain on my face, feeling the wind in my hair, it kind of grabbed me at that very early stage. So I turned very slowly from a hobby into a profession through the Royal Navy first of all, and then in 1987, after being made redundant in a marine firm in London, when I was a little bit outspoken, probably the reason why. I'm a northerner, by the way, so that's why I kind of say it as it is. Why not? I think we need to do that nowadays a little bit more than perhaps we did otherwise. I formed British Weather Services in 1987. And at that time, it was typewriters, no internet, no nothing. I was up against the Met Office. I won't tell you exactly what happened, because I've told you what happened in month one, because it's showing off, but I did pretty well, let me put it that way. And not looked back since, got into niche areas. Now, this is very important. All of that time, finding these niche areas gave us the business, and it was a business. It wasn't just forecasting, there was some of that, there was other elements of it. There was legal work that I get involved with, site investigations, going to court. It goes around in circles. The most important thing is what's happening now, and is what happened over the last 20 years, but particularly now with climate change, etc. So, I decided 4 years ago to write a book, and the book's called Whether or Not. I'm not selling them tonight in any shape or form. Just so that you know, this book is all about why the weather is the most impactful thing in your lives, bar nothing else. It dictates what you eat, what you drink, what you wear, what you feel like, how you die, how you live, how you get married, all of these things. Okay, it's the weather, it's that out there that really governs what we do and where we're about. And I'm not even mentioning the severe things now, the extremes. I'm mentioning the everyday stuff, so it's a dead easy read, 2 hours, and it takes you into that a lot of people miss out why climate change is so important, because this is the sort of start and end of it. This is what matters. Okay? And then last year I co-authored a book called Surviving Extreme Weather. We're all doomed. We're all doomed, he says. Not quite, but as you'll find out in a second when I play the video, we are at a pivotal point. And of course the Chew Valley incident that I appeared on Channel 4 talking about, I went to Bath University and did that one. That was a pleasure to do. For you guys, that's your bag, that's your area. This is, you know this more than I, in terms of what your risks are, etc. Because every risk is different from region to region, town to town, village to village, and you've got to be aware of that. So at the moment, my next stage, and this is important now in terms of going forward, it's not, for me, necessarily net zero. It's not renewables. All of that is absolutely fine. Carry on. Do what you need to do. Running adjacent to that is something else, and it's called health, safety, and inevitably survival. And that's where my direction now is more focused. Why? Because we're behind the times. We are literally behind the times. And you can see, don't look at Chew Valley, don't look at your own area and think nothing's happening, it's been sort of sanguine for the last 3 weeks, so okay. Don't even look at Britain necessarily, look around the world and join the dots, and you will find a picture, okay? So, I'm going to leave it at that for now. There will be, by the way, going forward, a course that we're producing in British Weather Services, a course and an examination, a certificated examination where you can walk away and say, I've passed all of that. Why that? Simply because if you understand what to do in emergency situations, or even before you get there, your preparedness, you can pass that back on to somebody else. You can pass it on to your family, to your business colleagues, whoever it happens to be. And the wiser you become, and they become, the less chance you have of falling foul of what comes next. And it will come. Okay? So, what will come? You'll see some of that in this film. It's what's already been, and then I'll pick it up from there. You want to play the film? Okay, so the good news is that video is about 8 months old. The bad news is things have got worse, as you've seen with the LA fires. And what is going on around the world, even as we speak today, certain things are going off, 40 degrees in Texas. You just look all over the place and they're there. Yes, it's not necessarily in your vision. Now, David mentioned I go on TV sometimes and go on radio. And I go into the press as well in terms of comments, etc. I don't hold back. I do go on to places like GB News and Talk TV, these far-right stations, for the most part, not all of it, but for the most part. And yes, I'm pleased to say I went up against Mr. Mogg 2 times, and I told him the last time that he would lose his seat, and he did. Where I come from, not originally, but now, is High Wycombe, the home of, used to be the home of Steve Baker, another climate denier, and now it's Emma Reynolds, not a climate denier. And she's on Question Time tonight, by the way, if anybody's interested, afterwards. So, going into the lion's den, as I put it, it's not brave, it's necessary, even with death threats that you get for going on there and speaking as I speak. And I'm proud to do that. And I'm not here to do that for me, okay? I'm here to do it for sons and daughters and grandchildren, people perhaps not in this audience tonight, but people walking on that street out there. That's the future. You know it. You already know all of this. I'm not teaching you to suck eggs in any shape or form. But I need to get that message across, and I'm not fearful of that. Okay? I'm absolutely not fearful of going into these places and arguing with the likes of Nigel Farage, which I've done 2 or 3 times. Okay? I say arguing, debating. You know, sometimes I was saying it earlier, it's a bit like Nigel Farage is actually quite soft. You think he's a hard man, he's a showman. But when you get into the teeth of him, and remember, they're in my area of expertise. I'm not in theirs. They may present that, but when they fight with me, if you like, or try to knock me down as they do, they won't win. Which is why I'm getting less spots with them nowadays than I did before. You know, that shows to me that I've got one over them. And that's important. But I'm going to finish, because I know I'm time limited to a degree. I just need to say to you guys, think about what I said about your health, your safety. When I say you, all of us, your safety and potentially your survival. What happens in this particular area with Chew Valley will happen from time to time, whatever it happens to be, whether it be a wildfire, major flood again, whatever. It will continue to happen. We are at record levels with fossil fuel emissions. We are at record levels with the temperature profile, the global temperature profile being around about 1.5, and occasionally every other month it dips above. And we're destined for 2 degrees. Final analogy, okay? Think about this for a second. Oh, 1 degree, 2 degrees, that's not exactly a lot, is it? It sounds like that. It sounds like that. Well, look. You live around about 37 degrees centigrade. That's your body heat, yeah? Give or take, half a degree either direction. You add 1.5 degrees to that, and you will feel ill. You'll be in bed. You'll have a fever. Add another half a degree too, you're in hospital. That's where we're destined, probably and arguably within the next 20 years. I'm accelerating it, because that's what's happening, okay? And if we go to 3, or even 4, well, 4 is annihilation of the world. It's as simple as that. We cannot live in it. Because you're going to see 60 degrees even in this country, never mind in what's going on now in other places. Not wishing to scare you to death, I'm basically saying this. Prepare yourself. Okay? Prepare your family. Prepare your neighbours. In whatever way you think is the greatest risk to you in where you live and what you're about. You ain't going to change the world, but change your part of the world, because that's the bit that you can do, if that makes sense. I'll do my bit by trying to change the bigger side of that and going on and doing what I do on the various radio stations, television stations, etc. That's what I will continue to do, and I'll continue to write books, and I'll make sure you guys and others are prepared. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you for your time. Q&A's at the end of all of this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, we're going to bring it much closer to home. And Joseph is now going to speak on behalf of the Environment Agency. So welcome, Joseph. And I'll cue up your slides.
So I've been told I need to hold the mic like this, but I think that makes it look like I'm about to do a freestyle rap without focus. So if you can hear me fine here, then I'll go for that. So my name's David Leonard. I work for the Environment Agency. I'm in the flood resilience team, so our team helps people understand their flood risk. We also work with communities and volunteers to plan and prepare for their flood risk. We've also got Paul ready for you to give him a grilling later. So Paul's from our Partnerships and Strategic Overview team. I think he's got a very long history of working on flood risk management in this area, so you should know his onions. Today I'm going to talk about the River Chew catchment and the challenges that come with that. I'm going to talk about 1968 floods, whether it could happen again, what's changed since 1968, and I'm also going to talk about how to check, understand, and prepare for your flood risk. So, this is the River Chew in the context of the Bristol Avon catchment that it sits in. I'm probably teaching you to suck eggs, but Bristol Avon flows from Wiltshire right to left out to the sea via the Severn Estuary, and the River Chew, the Chew Valley flows into Bristol Avon and Keynsham. This is a topographic map, so green and white, that's the sort of lowlands, and then you've got the pinky colour for the hills. Chew rises on the limestone mended hills, and it joins the Avon at Keynsham. It's an example of what we call a rapid response catchment. So the top of the catchment, the Winford Brook and the top of the Chew, very flashy, and levels can rise and fall very quickly. The Winford Brook flows off the Dundry Hills, and the Chew off the Mendit, and the Chew goes via the Chew Valley Lake. There's a couple of other characteristics of rapid response catchments that make them a real challenge, and they're relatively small catchments. I mean, the Chew, compared to the size of the whole of Bristol Avon, they're narrow, steep-sided. The floodplain's narrower, and there just isn't the space, so you end up with obstructions across the watercourse and bridges and buildings, and also close to the river. Other challenges in Chew is the fact it's rural and the historic environment. There's a lot of listed and historic buildings in the Chew Valley on the river corridor. It's also somewhat touristy, which comes with its own challenges. So it's also characterised by the Chew Valley Lake and also the Chew Magna Reservoir on the Winford Brook. Both of those are for water supply, they're both owned by Bristol Water. But we know them to have an effect on reducing flood risk as well. So this is saying, with the hills that make it a rapid response catchment, that comes with weather effects. So you get what's called orographic rainfall, which is when clouds reach hills, and as they rise over the hills, they cool and they dump their rain. There's obviously loads of tributaries of the Bristol Avon. You get the Boy, the Biss, the Summer, and each of those has different characteristics. When it comes to flood risk, it's all about probability. How likely is that event? And probability, in a way, is a synonym of luck. So where's the rainfall? Where's the path of the storm? What have the last few months been like? How saturated is the land? And so all of these things can come together to make a very different flood event. And that brings me on to why we're here, the Chew Valley floods of 1968. So yes, it was a summer flash flood. 172 millimetres of rain was recorded in 18 hours in Chewstoke. That's 7 inches, that's 2 months of rainfall in 18 hours. So it followed some storms in France that headed north, and we got heavy rainfall across the southwest. And it fell on saturated ground, so you essentially just got sheet runoff. It washed branches and trees down and debris blocked bridges and weirs, essentially creating dams. debris would build up against the parapets of bridges until that bridge would just give way, and this effect would go along the river, taking bridges as it went and creating these waves as it went. Bridges and cars were swept away, 250 homes were flooded, some to as much as 3 metres. So there's pictures there from Pensford and Chewstoke. Next slide. Yeah, so the centre of Pensford was annihilated. I think that's Pensford in the top right. Yeah. I mean, I can certainly feel removed from history sometimes when I read about past flooding, but tragically in this flood, 8 people died. 3 of those were in a car in Keynsham. The car was swept off a bridge. There were 4 people in the car, 3 of them died. I think the last guy was rescued several hours later from a tree. Water reached the top of ground floors in Kew Magna. I've also got some pictures there from Leonard. That's the Queen's Arms. That's a flood mark. I think many of you would have seen flood marks along the Tube Valley. For context, Melvin is up here. He towers above me, and he's at the height of his flood mark. In Kew Magna, the Windford and the Tube meet, which caused water to back up. The lake didn't overtop in 1968, from what I've read from the Bristol Rivers Authority report. So lake levels rose 0.5 metre. But it's estimated that the lake held back additional flows that were 2/3 the size of the flows that went down the catchment. So an additional 2/3 that was held back by the lake. Afterwards, there was a massive community clear-up effort. The Duke of Edinburgh, the now King, came to Pensford and Keynsham. Some houses had to be demolished, and the government opened a flood relief fund. There's a lot of uncertainty when it comes to putting a number on the frequency of a flood like this. We estimate it to be around 1 in 200 to 1 in 1,000 chance of this occurring in any given year. I think recent research, now we have a better ability to model flow data. I was reading a paper that suggested that we've maybe underestimated the flows, and it was even higher, so that would make it a lower frequency, more extreme event than we originally thought. So it wasn't just Tube Valley on those days, 10th of July, 11th of July. There were widespread impacts across the southwest. So in Cheddar, the Yo car was washed down into the entrances of the Cheddar Caves and destroyed a cafe. Bristol, 3,000 properties flooded, so the Pigeon House Stream and the Malago Rivers in Bedminster affected by the same weather event. I've also put Blackford and Wedmore, so they're in Somerset. Blackford, according to the parish website, someone died in Blackford, which I don't think is included in that 8 deaths that I said earlier. Yeah, that's a picture from Sidmouth, East Devon. The Bristol Rivers Authority report said Chippenham, Melksham all affected with properties flooding. Trees like Cam and the Wellow, so Midsummer Norton and Radstock. But the highest rainfall that day and the biggest devastation was in Chew, with about 172 millimetres in 18 hours. So could it happen again? Could we see something like this again? 1968 was a freak weather event, but Jim was talking about it. We're seeing freak weather events again and again. Residents of Kew Magna will remember the 2012 flood. I'm sure lots of people in this room will be able to talk about it. It was a particularly wet winter. There was initially flood events in September, and then after heavy rain, a particularly bad event in November. Again, Chewstoke, the Ford, someone died in a car driving into the Ford in Chewstoke. I put another example up there, the Cam Valley flash floods in May 2023, and the reason I put that is because that's also summer flash floods, so 2012 was winter flooding. So we saw 80 to 100 millimetres in 1 to 2 hours. Looking at the radar, the storm radar, we believe it could have even missed the gauges, and it may be more than that. Hundreds of properties flooded. I went there after those floods, and I spoke to people, and I spoke to this family who'd carried someone on their child on their back through waist high water, and it's just remarkable that no one died in that event. So something more recent. Storm BART, November last year. Properties were affected along the whole of Bristol Avon, from North Wiltshire down to Hanham in Bristol. 120 millimetres of rain in the top of the catchment, 70 millimetres around Keynsham. Highest river level ever recorded at Bradford-on-Avon. So that level only goes back to the 90s, but significantly was higher than the 2000 flood in Bradford-on-Avon, which was something of a benchmark for UK floods. So I've got a few stats. So 2023 to 2024, so the water year runs from October to September. 2023 to 2024 was the wettest water year since records began in 1871. This is actually true. So our operational area is Wessex, so we cover Dorset, Wiltshire, Somerset, and that's true for that whole of that area. You can see 1968 doesn't feature, which goes to further emphasise how 1968 was a freak storm where we saw 2 months of rainfall in one day, but it wasn't necessarily as wet a water year as we've seen. I think the flood wardens from Chew Magna will be able to tell you how hard 2023 to 2024 is. I think we've always been teetering on the edge of something. You can also see the driest water years on the right, so I think you might remember the 2022 droughts, and that followed 21 to 22, which was the 5th driest year on record. So, I mean, we're seeing a real swing there from droughts to storms. So this is a ranking of the wettest July months for the Mendips and Chew. Sorry, that's the area we're looking at, Mendips and Chew. Again, this is since records began in 1871. You've got 2023 there, July 2023. July 1968 was the 31st because most of that rainfall just fell in those one day. Okay, and then wettest winters, thinking about winter 2012. So you've got 2023, 2024 in there again, so that's, we're looking at October to March, so winter time. 2012 to 2013, we saw a lot of flooding in Chew, and it's 25th wettest. You'll remember 2013, 2014 is also a very wet year. Okay. Oh, I've got one more page of stats. I love stats, I'm sorry, I hope everyone else loves stats. So, I'm not sure if you can see the key, but we've got January there in the top left, we've got last 3 months, so preceding January in the top right, we've got the last year in the bottom right. Black is exceptionally high rainfall, blue is notably high, green is normal. So we've had an exceptionally wet year still up to January 2025, still seeing records broken. January 2025 was notably wet. We had storms Owen and Herminia, which I think we got pretty close in this area, but significant flooding in Somerset. But the last 3 months have actually been normal with a comparatively dry December. Okay, that really is enough stats. Okay. So, yeah, now feels like a good time to talk about climate change. I talked a lot there about stats from the Chew area, but we're seeing records broken globally, and it helps, as Jin's saying, to think wider. We do know that extreme weather events are becoming more frequent, which makes the risk of flooding higher, and the crux of it is that warm air holds more water. So we're expecting to see bigger, more frequent floods over the 21st century, particularly during winter, but along with this we're expected to see increased flows and summer flooding to become more common. So the headline there is increase in both winter and summer flooding. And the probability of an event like the 1968 flood is going to be a lot more likely by the 2080s. We can't attribute any one particular storm to climate change, but obviously you can see the direction of travel there, and things are getting stormier. So I'm going to start talking now about what's changed since 1968, because a lot has changed. So directly after, there was months of clearance work by the Bristol Rivers Authority, removing trees and debris. The local council took a lot of the masonry away. Watercourses were deepened and widened, and the bridges that came down, so that's the Pensford A37 bridge, they were replaced with wide concrete bridges, like on the right there. However, all those geographical challenges that I described earlier when I was talking about the Chew catchment, they all remain. So, I mean, it's still capped by clay, which is largely impermeable to rainfall. It's still a rapid response catchment with a flashy valley, and it's still got a lot of the historic and listed buildings close to on the river corridor. So the Environment Agency was introduced in 1996. That's who I work for, that's who the Pool works for, and we took over the responsibilities of the National Rivers Authority, and then the Pollution Inspectorate and Waste Regulation Authorities. And we've been given the role of strategic overview for flood risk management. So that means we work with our partners to manage flood risk across the country, and we use the full range of options across all of our partners in a coordinated way. But there's a lot of people involved in the world of flood risk management, some of whom are in the room. As I said, we have strategic overview. We also manage flood risk from main rivers. So main rivers are your larger rivers, both the Chew and the Winford Brook are main rivers. You can see a map of that online, which ones are classed as main rivers. The local authority in this area, obviously Baines, they manage flood risk on smaller watercourses, so some of the tributaries, Chew. And they also have a role as the lead local flood authority, so that comes with some duties like investigating the causes of flooding. They also manage the risk of flooding from surface water. So, I mean, if you don't know what surface water is, that's just the drainage system getting overwhelmed, and so you get flooding over land. Highways authorities, they're involved, they manage highways drainage, again that's locally, that will sit within the local authority, within Baines, or it's Highways England for some of the major roads. And then water and sewage companies manage the flooding from sewers. And then there's also a lot of smaller organisations at play, rivers trusts, landowners, drainage boards, but not in this area. Yeah, with strategic overview. We're a data-driven organisation. Each flood we collect data, we carry out modelling with that data, and we use that to improve our ability to board inform. We use that data to share it with our partners like Baines, and we use it to explore all the available options that we've got for different catchments. One thing that's come on massively since 1968 is our knowledge and understanding of flood risk, our ability to forecast, and subsequently our ability to warn and inform, and also our knowledge of flood risk management overall. So by improving our ability to warn so action can be taken, we now have the means to reduce the impacts. And this is huge. I mean, the number one cause, take for example the fact I keep talking about how many people have died in cars, that's the number one cause of death from floods, and warning and awareness saves lives, and building resilience to flooding and preparing for flooding across the whole of society and working across the whole of society is how you can save lives by building resilience. So yeah, preparing for flooding and resilience reduces impacts. It's a whole of society action, and we're lucky in the Chew group that we have a lot of active flood groups and parish councils who are active in preparing for flooding. So yeah, I just spoke about how knowledge of and ability to map flood risk has come on massively. So that data and modelling I spoke about is available to view online. We've recently done a major update of all of our flood risk data, and that's been published in January. Anyone can view it at gov.uk. It uses both existing detailed local information and a massively improved national data set. It also shows potential flood depths, provides much higher resolution maps than before. So that's a screenshot of the rivers and sea flood risk. You can also check the flood risk for surface water. And for the first time, it also includes data showing how climate change is expected to change the risk of flooding using UK climate projections. So yeah, I urge you to go and check your risk. Flood warning service. So at the time of the 1968 floods, the River Authority had its own gauges, but it didn't work with the Met Office. So it had as much knowledge of forecasts as the average person. There was a flood warning system for the main Bristol Avon, but warnings were just given to the police and local authorities. 1996, Environment Agency comes along. We've got a full flood warning service now. It covers what I said was main rivers, so it doesn't cover everywhere. So we have a team of flood warning duty officers on duty 24/7, 365 days a year, monitoring forecasts and levels, issuing alerts and warnings. And we also have something called the Flood Forecasting Centre. So that's a long-term partnership with the Met Office that's enhancing and improving our ability to forecast and warn for flooding. We've invested a lot in flood forecasting models to ensure those warnings are issued with the maximum amount of lead time that we can. And forecasting models are also reviewed and updated with the most recent data to improve their accuracy. In the Chew Valley, in addition to our flood warning service, we've piloted a bespoke flash flood forecast. So that's based on radar rainfall forecast. And it identifies potential problematic thunderstorms. It's sent direct to flood wardens. Since we piloted that in the last 10 years, it hasn't reached the threshold to trigger. But we do have the regular flood warning service, as I said, which is based on forecast and levels, and we've got that working relationship with the Met Office. So you can sign up for flood warnings. Anyone can sign up online. Main Rivers in the Sea doesn't warn you about surface water, but there are other ways of getting warnings. You can also check river levels online on next slide. I can send out these slides afterwards if anyone wants them. Or just go to gov.uk/flood and you can access all of this. So river levels and rain gauge levels. Okay, in addition to those river levels, so next slide, sorry. So due to the difficult nature of the Chew catchment and how flashy it is, we've installed these 2 new innovative gauges, I think in the last year, and they provide almost real-time data. So there's one on the Winford Brook, and there's one on the Chewstoke Ford. So that's us doing the calibration for that and the surveying for that in that same spot as that 1968 flood photo. So yeah, these were piloted in the Cam Valley, which I talked about earlier, after those May 2023 floods, those flash floods. Tech for gauges has come on a long way, so they're small and discreet, and they've got really, reliable batteries that can work in storms, and they're solar powered. And so we installed these gauges with support from parish councils and flood groups, and the fact that we had a good relationship with the parish council and flood groups helped us to install these so that they could plan around the data from these gauges. But anyone can go and access the data. So we've got a Chew portal on that website where you can see the data from that. There's a Chew dashboard. Okay, next. Met Office weather warnings, in addition to our flood warnings. So if you're at surface water flood risk, this can be helpful in terms of giving you a heads up. There's a lot of detail in Met Office warnings. It's usually just a headline, but you can dig into that and they'll have risk matrices at the bottom and further details about where they think the storm path is going to go and where they think the impacts are. So if you're at risk, make sure you read all the detail in those Met Office warnings. Okay, what else has changed since 1968? Also since those floods, there's been big changes to the UK's emergency preparedness structure. So the Civil Contingencies Act was introduced in 2004. The government said at the time that the previous bill wasn't fit to cope with natural threats like flooding, and so this act came in and it broadened the number of agencies and authorities that had responsibilities when it came to planning for emergencies. Whereas before, at that time, it was just local authority, police and fire. It also guided the creation of something called local resilience forums, which some of you might be familiar with. And these are multi-agency partnerships who plan and prepare for emergencies and produce emergency plans. And this has built closer working relationships between all of the relevant authorities. So in 2022, the government published the UK Resilience Framework, which sets out how we can further strengthen resilience to risks in the UK. As I was saying earlier, it emphasised how resilience is a whole of society endeavour, and we need to be able to build resilience from the top down, bottom up. Okay, so in the Civil Contingencies Act, it defined us, the Environment Agency, as a Category 1 responder. So that means we have a duty to respond to flood incidents. We work with other emergency services. We need to make sure we're keeping the public, media, partners, MPs informed. we issue our flood warnings and we collect and record information about every flood. Right, okay. So, building resilience. We, the Environment Agency, do a lot of work alongside our partners like Baines, supporting communities to prepare for flooding, whether that's the parish council, flood group, local flood warden, community resilience group. And it's built on the principle that local knowledge, community ties are paramount to building resilience, reducing the impacts of flooding. So some parish councils have been creating emergency plans or flood plans, and we've got dedicated teams for the Environment Agency and Baines that can help with that. Recently, as part of that work, Baines have started hosting an annual Resilience Day, which brings together parish councils, resilience groups to learn, share knowledge on emergency preparedness. This year's one was in Salford, and we heard from Salford Parish Council about the emergency preparedness work they've been doing. And I think there's going to be another one, October, November time, so if you want to hear about that, then contact Baines Emergency Planning. I can give you their email address if you want to be put on the distribution list, but they're open to everyone. I mentioned the TEW group a little already. Their resilience group has expanded to more than just flooding, but we're responding to other emergencies as well. Sorry, I'm laughing because they're down in the front row. They could tell you all about the challenges of living at the confluence of the Wingford Brook and the TEW, and they have a large amount of volunteers, but that comes with a lot of challenges when it comes to the resilience of the flood group itself, sustainability of the flood group. They're an example of a large group, but we also work with flood wardens who are just one person. I'm sure Lynn and Alex down the front would be happy to talk to you about the work the TEW Flood Group does, if you haven't spoken to them or met them already. So the Flood Warden Group, next slide, we're involved in a property flood resilience scheme that's been implemented in TEW Magna. So as I said, TEW Valley is a very challenging catchment. The conservation status, the geography has meant that a traditional flood scheme hasn't ever been able to be feasible in TEW Magna. And where it's too challenging due to the cost or geography or things like that, we have this PFR scheme that pays for adaptations for homes, and that resists floodwater. And we've done this in TEW Magna. And this was done in partnership with Baines. So PFR was finished being installed in TEW Magna in 2015, and then the onus is on homeowners to then store and maintain and look after that property flood resilience, so that's floodboards once those are installed. So actually each year the flood group have a resilience day. I think it's expanded to lots more than just about the property flood resilience, but I think one of the aims of this resilience day was reminding residents to check they know how to install their PFR, check that they know how to maintain it, and just general awareness raising. And checking pumps work, yes, because that's part of property flood resilience. It's not just floodboards, there's a whole range of measures, which takes me nicely on to the next slide. That's our scheme, but we would encourage anyone to check their risk, and if they're on the flood map, consider making adaptations to your home. So this could be funded privately, or if you've been affected by flooding. If you're part of the Build That Better, which is the flood scheme, which is an insurance scheme, they'll pay for, if you claim after flooding, they'll pay for you to make PFR adaptations to your homes, PFR, property flood resilience. So PFR is split into two categories. You've got your resistance measures, which are all about keeping the water out, and then you've got your resilience measures, which are all about, if water gets in, making it clear up quicker and easier. We now have an improved understanding of flood risk management on the whole, and we understand the importance of a whole catchment-based approach. What that means is a catchment-based approach. This means using the full range of available tools on a catchment-wide scale to reduce the impacts of heavy rainfall. So as part of that, all the tools in your toolbox. So as part of that, we now know that we have evidence that nature can play a major role in improving the nation's resilience to flooding, and that means, where appropriate, restoring the natural functions of rivers and reconnecting rivers to their floodplain where it's appropriate. And taking that evidence forwards and delivering that challenge, is something that requires us to work with and through our partners, one of which is BART, Bristol Avon Rivers Trust, and I believe we're going to hear from them now.
Thank you, Joseph. Marathon session, more from him later. But over to Simon. Simon Hunter, CEO of the Bristol Avon Rivers Trust, who's going to take you through what they're up to.
Thank you very much. And just to check, can everyone hear me if I speak like this? Again, I'm not a rapper, so I'll keep it low. Anyway, thank you very much for the introduction. So I'm Simon Hunter, Chief Exec of Bristol Avon Rivers Trust, and I've been tasked today to give you a bit of a flavour of some of the work that, as a local charity, we've been doing to try and build resilience. And it was a really nice slide that you left me on, looking at sort of nature-based solutions, natural flood management, and thinking catchment-based approach. So we've got to think of these as big-scale landscape solutions. Water flows from A to B, and we've got to think of really a strategic way of working with nature as opposed to fighting against it, which traditionally we've done. So we've gone to the next slide. So a little bit about us first. So Bristol Avon Rivers Trust, we are a charity. We deliver a whole range of different projects ranging from education, engagement work with our local communities, and practical land and river management as well. We are one of 64, I think, Rivers Trusts across the country, and our patch is mapped on here. So we are the Bristol Avon Rivers Trust, but that includes all of the tributaries and some of the marine and ditch networks on the Severn Estuary, in North Somerset and in South Gloss. So we span across 5 local authorities, and we work with a whole range of different partners, including the Environment Agency, Natural England, the local authorities. We work with other ENGOs, and essentially you guys in the room, the communities as well. So here's the next one, please. So what I'm going to talk about is what we call nature-based solutions. There's several definitions that we'll talk around in the next slide, but essentially these are natural solutions to holding water back and reintroducing processes, natural processes in the landscape that once existed. So we've done a real good job over time of intensifying and changing our landscape. We've drained all of our land, we've straightened our rivers, we've basically just got water off of it and into watercourses as quickly as possible. And nature-based solutions is a way of trying to reverse that and reintroduce some of the natural features that would have once existed in our landscape. And in doing so, we can create sponge-like habitats. We can reconnect floodplains in strategic areas which naturally would have flooded. We can look at ways that we can integrate wetlands into our landscape. We can look at ways that we can slow the flow of water through what we call leaky dams and woody debris in our rivers. And in doing so, there are lots of benefits. So this scaled up can deliver a range of different ecosystem services. So we can help store and purify water resources in our landscape. We can help reduce flood risk and the pressures on our sewer systems as well. We stop in some of that water reaching our surface water drains in the first place, which then overwhelms our systems. And we can essentially provide space for nature. We have got a climate and a nature emergency, and both of them can be tackled together if we think strategically. Nature-based solutions should, in my opinion, be used alongside the traditional flood convention schemes. It's not a replacement, but the benefits of nature-based solutions, I think, are only just starting to be understood. And some of the things that I'm going to show you through this slide pack, again, some Environment Agency have just released this great data set where they've been monitoring some of this over time. And through scaling up nature-based solutions, we've seen up to 55% across some of our catchments of reduced flooding, based on the fact that this, at a catchment scale, can really make a difference alongside the traditional engineered solutions. So pop to the next slide, please. So there's a couple of definitions, I won't rattle through them, but basically they are inspired and supported by nature, they're cost effective, these things are very minimal in cost compared to big grey concrete and engineered solutions. There's a lot less carbon being emitted, in fact a lot of them store carbon, so great for sort of climate resilience as well. And essentially a lot of these will produce indirect benefits to the social and the economy as well locally, from having great spaces to be in as a community, to have for recreation, and also to provide great nature spots as well in our green and blue spaces. Okay, next slide. So I've got a couple of case studies that I wanted to sort of slowly run through. I've got 3 or 4 in total, and these are all based in this area. So this is actually the Cam Valley, so just the other side of the Chew Valley. The others are in the Chew Valley. Actually, that's a lie. This one is in the Chew Valley. The next one's in the Cam Valley. This is essentially near Chelwood, so we're right up in the headwaters of a small stream, and you'll know it very well. We've got the A road that runs down the bottom and the top of the photo there. And this is a big arable field. It's sloped and it's right up in the headwaters. And what really was concerning is that A road was flooding quite often. And from a biodiversity perspective and a water quality perspective, there was a lot of sediment, there was a lot of nutrients coming from this field, running straight into a ditch network that then fed the source, essentially, of one of our best trout spawning and possibly salmon spawning tributaries on the Chew. So there's a lot of things here that were wrong, and there's a lot of drivers to try and think about how we would resolve and create a solution. And the aim here really was to work in partnership with the landowner. And to emphasise the point, there unfortunately isn't enough out there for farmers to access grants to be able to do some of this work themselves. And there isn't enough resource really in specialism to be able to support them to deliver these sort of meaningful projects. So this is where Bristol Avon Rivers Trust came in and helped assist. We helped secure the funding. We worked, in this case, with the Environment Agency on implementing the plan, and we've seen a number of benefits as a result. So if we go to the next slide, we've got the before shot on the left. This is the same time of year, roughly, so winter of 2021. You can see really compact soils there. Again, typical Chew Valley, clay soils that hold lots of water. We've got our headwater stream running alongside the hedgerow there, and basically water was running straight off of here into that network. It was a real headache for the landowner. He had to dredge that ditch about 3 or 4 times a year, and when he didn't, there was obviously issues with highways just at the end of his land in the corner. And so we convinced him to talk to us about a potential solution here. In this instance, what we decided was we tried to work with the landowners to think about land management. Could he put that back into pasture? Could we increase the surface roughness of that slope field? It was a step too far for him. He was in a sequence of maize at the time and wasn't willing to budge from that. But however, what he did do was plant an overwintering crop. So it meant that his bare field was no longer bare. In doing that, we also worked on a design where we took, I think it's around a 15-metre buffer strip, so essentially a field margin out of production, and we created what you can see on the right-hand side there, which is a very lovely meadow sort of buffer strip that runs parallel to the stream, but with a series of what we call bunded scrapes. Now these are really simple interventions. A man with a digger can come in and essentially we pull back the soil and the topsoil and we create these bunds. They're no higher than sort of half a metre high, and it creates this lovely ponded area. So when the water comes off the field, instead of running straight into that ditch, taking everything with it, filling up the sill, we actually have 5 or 6 ponds here that fill up slowly. The sediments drop out in those little ponds. And we've got a point there, a seal level, where when the water hits a certain height, it will discharge through a small pipe, and then it will spill through a brand new hedgerow that we planted all the way along here. So again, reducing the time that water is leaving that field. Just imagine that scaled up across the whole of the Chew Valley. These little interventions that provide a wonderful solution to slowing the flow of water, but also providing these really important ecological corridors that join ancient woodlands in this perspective in the landscape. So that's one intervention there. If I just go to the next one, I can show you some of what these look like a couple of years later. So again, we've got field vole, returning to the fields. We've got birds of prey. We've got river flies starting to pop up in some of these ponds, and we're starting to see succession. So we've got these wetland species that would have once existed in this landscape. Again, brilliant from a biodiversity perspective, but that surface roughness helps to slow the flow of water in the landscape. Okay. So this is the second case study, and this one is also in the Chew Valley, so it must be the third one that's in the can. This one is in Pensford, and many of you may have seen this particular site occur over the last couple of years. Again, as a Rivers Trust, we rely on project funding, so nothing is given to us. We're always writing bids, we're trying to work with farmers, we're trying to line everything up essentially, and a really good opportunity came up to apply for DEFRA. I think it was the Green Recovery Fund at the time, to deliver several projects in the Chew Valley, and this was one of them. And essentially, we saw a really good opportunity here in essentially what was a big floodplain area, and that's quite rare for the Chew. You know, a big area that was disconnected really from the main watercourse, but also was providing a bit of a highway for field runoff. So at the time it was a ryegrass field, there were livestock in there wasn't a buffer strip, it was quite compact. And we saw an opportunity by working with the landowner to slow that flow of water in the landscape and deliver some really nice, biodiverse, rich habitat at the same time. So the aim here was twofold really: improve that floodplain biodiversity, but also to create that sponge habitat. So if we go to the next slide, you can see there on the top left. So again, I'll emphasise this is a process. You know, you need lots of permissions in place, working with the Environment Agency, planning permission, to get to that stage where you've got a digger. Probably takes at least 8 to 9 months, a year, to get all the paperwork and the red tape cut through. When you get there, that's the easy part of the project. Essentially, we turned that ryegrass field into what you can see here. We call it a semi-permanent wetland or seasonal wetland, where it holds water between 8 and 9 months of the year. And essentially what that's done is we've cut that field in half with a big hedgerow. I think it's nearly 300 metres long. So again, this over big, over wide field, generating lots of surface water coming off of it. So we stuck this big hedgerow right down the middle and separated it. That's a big win, reducing that flow pathway and preventing that water going from A to B quickly. In the floodplain shelf, we have this wonderful area where there was a number of surface water drains, and there were also some springs that were emerging on the slope. And we worked out through working with the landowner where they were, and we wanted to collapse those surface water drains that were draining straight into the river and actually connect them into some of this wetland feature. In doing so, we stopped again some of that water that would quickly scurry off of our land and into our watercourses and feed this wetland. Essentially, this was delivered about 2 years ago, and this photo was probably a year ago, so it was a little while ago. But what we've got here is a floodplain that is a sponge. The soils are starting to be less compact. We're seeing more infiltration, and we're starting to see lots of vegetation pop up here. I think, Dan, you've been here. I've shown you around a couple of times. So again, this is a site that we're starting to monitor through citizen science as well. So we've got lots of communities that are being upskilled. They're collecting this data, and we're starting to find out how this site will mature over time. So we'll go to the next slide, please. So this is the final case study. This is the one that's just over the way in the Cam Valley. So this flows down into Midson, Norton and Radstock. It's what we call an ephemeral stream. So again, we've got a really steep landscape. Water literally emerges overnight, it seems, out of springs, and when the rainfall comes in, we get these big raging torrents down a field you can see on the left-hand side, and with it comes sediment and everything else, the nutrients. So again, we were working with the landowner here to think about how we could attenuate and slow the flow of water, reducing some of the surface water risk to some of the laneways downstream. So again, we looked at nature-based solutions, and here I'm going to show you an example of some attenuation ponds and some large wood debris. Okay. So there you go, this is part of the scheme. So this was a ditch, and it was straight, and the water would fly through the middle of the field, and it would end up in a ditch network that would then discharge straight into the main river. And all of that was causing a lot of flooding to little lanes around this landscape, leading some households isolated during wet weather. Also, one of the big things here was the amount of sediment that was coming off fields above. There's a big arable field. All of that sediment was heading into the ditch network, which then filled up and caused more concerns to our surface water drains. So we came up with a scheme here that involved placing large woody debris to try and bifurcate and create slow the flow of water in the landscape. If we go on to the next slide, we've got the video if that will work. So if you hover there, it might not work. Okay, never mind, that's fine. But here was going to show the quantity of sediment being held behind some of these structures. And if we jump to the next one then. We've, at the headwaters of this site, we've installed 3 big attenuation ponds. So again, the water would fly off that hill straight into the watercourse. Here we're just helping to slow that flow through the series of attenuation ponds. Again, settling out any sedimentation and just slowing that flow of landscape. Around here we've got lots of trees that have been planted, and either side of the woody debris that we put in, again we've planted several hundred trees to try and reduce that flow pathway in general. Okay, and I think that's probably all I wanted to talk through. It's a bit of a whistle-stop tour of case studies, but essentially nature-based solutions, they do offer that cost-effective way to enhance resilience in our landscapes. We've got to think about working with nature and in partnership with it rather than against it, and really we can tackle the ecological emergency and the climate emergency together by building these big strategic plans across different partnerships. And one exciting project that I would just like to sort of note and flag to the room really is the big lower tube forest that's being led by Avon Needs Trees. At Bristol Avon Rivers Trust, we've been delivering a lot of the baseline ecological surveys, the hydrological surveys, and working in collaboration with them to ensure that we can restore that landscape from a water perspective, as well as this wonderful woodland. So again, bringing the 2 different skill sets together and thinking collectively, working with different partners, we've got an opportunity here to really think about where nature-based solutions can have the most important role. And that's me probably finished. So thank you very much.
Welcome, Dan. Thank you for joining us. You've only got a few minutes with us tonight.
Yeah, I'm afraid
Okay. Would you like to say a few words?
I'm happy to say a few words. I've obviously missed all your presentations.
Yes.
I have no idea what you've said. I've got a rough guess, I guess. So thank you. I'm looking behind you, so I'm not really
Hello everybody, thank you very much for your attendance tonight. Well look, I share many of the points that you already raised, because I've on a number of times, I think 2 or 3 times we've gone out and had a look at the situation, particularly in the Tube Valley there, not far from where I live actually. I took Angel with me on a couple of things, I think as well, to be fair. Look, the climate emergency is something that matters to me. I really believe that you cannot ignore the evidence. I think it is overwhelming. I think there is, it's an open and shut case as far as I'm concerned. I don't buy into Mr. Trump's views or anybody else who feels that you can somehow keep producing CO2 ever increasing amounts without it having any consequence. And in fact, I suspect we have gone past some points of no return where it's going to take even longer now to get to where we want it to be for future generations. So I think we've got to be very honest and candid about that. It's hard to deal with the global politics when you have people like Trump at the moment. That will change, thank goodness, but in the meantime we have to keep doing what we know is right and what we can do. So as your regional mayor, I hope some of you will be aware that one of the things that I'm very keen on is making sure that there are resources for dealing with the climate emergency and dealing with the ecological emergency too. What I try to do with the limited amount of money I've got, it sounds like lots because it's many millions, but what I try to do is to amplify its impact by making sure that we get other funds in, we draw in other funding. So for example, I've used resources that I've got as the mayor to create a potential fund of 100 million to kind of deal with, not obviously just this, a whole range of other things, but important things that I believe are critical to future generations. and I think we have a duty, it's beholden upon us to do what we know we can do and to do our best at that. Obviously, as a Member of Parliament and Member of Parliament for this area, I make sure that I'm doing my bit in Parliament to get across the importance of the challenge, not just on a national scale, but how it impacts on us locally and what we're trying to do and what we'd like to see from government. We don't always get it because government isn't like that. You cannot please everybody all the time, but you try and influence and shape that agenda to get the kind of things that we want. And Emma Hardy is the floods, I think, I can't remember exactly, the floods and water minister, something like that. Well, I talk to Emma fairly regularly. She, in fact, was with me, or more accurately, I was with her when she visited Salford, Wessex Water headquarters earlier this week, I think it was. I was tracking the days, it was earlier this week. And that's an important dialogue. And I'm pleased to report she's responsive and receptive to the arguments. So that is half the battle. But it's about how we translate things. And what I'm really grateful for is ideas that are cost effective, because we all know that there is a huge squeeze on resource in our country at the moment, probably globally as well, but certainly in our country. So cost effective ways that we can achieve these things that you just saw at the end of your presentation that you've outlined are clearly very important. I also think they look much better as well than all the other alternatives. I think they actually fit in with the outstanding beauty and irreplaceable countryside that we have in North East Somerset. So I hope that you will keep doing what you're doing, keep holding me to account. David, I'm sure, will do that, and others will keep doing that. That is important, because I have to battle a whole range of competing demands, from pragmatism when it comes to finances when money is limited, as well as making sure that we don't retreat on the truth as we know it to be when it comes to the environment and the ecology. So let's keep that dialogue going. I won't be able to please you all of the time, but I will do my best to engage with you, to be informed by you, to make it my business to know what's going on from your perspective as well as other people's, and I will do my very best to achieve what I believe to be most effective in dealing with the issues that I suspect you hold as dearly as I do, because it seems to me that there's been an awful lot of talking, what there hasn't been enough of is doing. So I am focused on delivery, hence my role as Mayor and my determination to not just do some of the things we've been talking about today, but also to make our region the implementing capital of the UK. I think there are certain important touchstones that actually are pushing at open doors when it comes to our community, because I think we have communities and organisations that are enlightened in our region. I think we're lucky for that, we're stronger for that, that's why we're getting so many good things going and happening. But that work can't be left to be assumed it will happen. We have to be like antibodies and keep it going. We don't let it slip back, we don't get complacent, we've got to kind of keep on kind of off balance, if you like, so we're always alert to what's going on, always trying to make it better. And I hope that you will continue to challenge me, and challenge me in the way that you do, which is a fair way. It's not negative criticism, it's constructive criticism, and politicians can handle that and make the best use of that, and it empowers them. Negative sort of short-circuit stuff tends to get into the worst part of politics, and I think this is too important an issue for us to do anything other than our absolute best. So thank you for your help. Sorry I've only just been able to arrive. You appreciate I'm a busy guy, and I do have to go to something else now. But I'm glad I managed to get in. I was out there waving my phone with a torch on, getting colder and colder, and that gentleman looked, but he didn't understand, and that's fine. I'm sure you'll be more open to me next time, and I'll make sure that we arrange the doorkeeping a bit more effectively. But thank you for your time, and thank you for listening to me and forgiving for me, as I didn't hear the presentation before. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dan. Thank you for joining us, and apologies for not arranging to let you in. I had hoped so. You're still on the door. That's thank you, Simon, for your words. We're going to go into the next bit, which is Joseph's final section, and then we're going to go to Q&A. So, understanding your flood risk is next.
Yeah, so don't worry, this won't be as manic a session as the last one. It'll be a woolly rhino at best. Yeah, natural flood management is really nice because it has multiple benefits. It's not just about flood risk, it's biodiversity, it's keeping sediment on the land, and yeah, it's a nice tool in the catchment toolbox. Yeah, what can you do about flooding? How can you get a handle on your flood risk? I've already mentioned quite a lot of things already, so checking your risk, checking what it is, signing up for flood warnings or alternatives, but there's more. The key principle here is preparation and planning go a long way to reducing impacts. I've said it enough already, but your risk isn't just what it says on the flood map, it's the impact it would have on your life. So by planning for it, you can reduce that impact and reduce your risk. So next slide. Yeah, make a plan. It can sound simple, but know how to turn off your gas, your electric, your water, know where your important documents are, put them in a high place, prepare a flood kit, make a note of important contact details, and think about the actions you've taken, think about when you would take those actions. Next slide. Yeah, so perhaps consider getting involved in your local flood group if you have one. So yeah, it's worth noting volunteers, community emergency volunteers, they don't do the job of the emergency services, but it's based on the principle that local residents know their community best, and they provide a vital link between us and all of the other authorities and all the other authorities in the local resilience forum and the community. So yeah, if your community doesn't have a group or a flood warden and you're interested, contact us, contact your parish council, let them know that that's something you're interested in, contact Baines Emergency Planning, and the details on the screen, and I'll send out slides if you want. Okay, riparian responsibilities and landowners. So if you own land next to the river, unless your deed says otherwise, riparian law says you own up to the middle of the watercourse. And that comes with a few rights and responsibilities. So ultimately, you're responsible for not increasing flood risk on your stretch of river, and you have to let water flow naturally, so that means removing blockages. There's loads more information on this, and I've got some resources over here. The Environment Agency, sorry, I shouldn't have put EA, that's really bad, I should put Environment Agency. The Environment Agency is, it doesn't have a duty to maintain rivers, but we do have what's called permissive powers. So these are permissive powers on main rivers. I've mentioned that main river concept a few times. That's the Chew and the Wingfoot are both main rivers. So that means when there's a clear flood risk justification and it's safe to do so, we have the powers to enter land and maintain parts of the river system. And the local authority have the same permissive powers on smaller ordinary watercourses. The other thing to say, if you're a landowner, there are opportunities to manage flooding on your land. If you have a lot of runoff from fields in heavy rain, there are ways you can help reduce flood risk, improve your land, and ultimately keep valuable topsoil on your land. So, work with us, work with Natural England, work with BART, talk to us. Work on or near a watercourse is regulated by environmental permitting regulations, so you might need permission for work. So that permission for main rivers will come from us, the Environment Agency, so check before you start ripping out trees. When it comes to managing your watercourse, we're here to help. We're not here to put barriers in the way, and there's a lot of expertise in the agency, so if you're not sure whether you need permission for something, just contact us and ask. So next slide. So, as I said, we don't have a duty to maintain rivers, but we have these permissive powers. And we consider each location that we're going to do river maintenance on carefully, considering the effectiveness, the environmental impact, and the financial viability. So we have in the past carried out flood mitigation work on the River Chew and the Wingfoot Brook. Work was undertaken by our field team. And that maintenance work involves cutting vegetation within the channel and on the river banks, removing any blockages. So those pictures aren't from Chew. I couldn't find any pictures from the field team from Chew. That's in Trowbridge. So each year, annually, we reassess where we're going to carry out maintenance based on the financial viability to maximise the maintenance budget that we have. And we use the modelling that I talked about. Well, we use modelling as evidence to define where we're going to do that maintenance, because we're ultimately a data-driven organisation. We consider wildlife. We always do surveys for voles and things like that, and we consult in-house ecologists. Okay, so next slide, sorry. Yeah, insurance. Check your insurance covers flooding if you're at flood risk. So there's something called the flood risk scheme, I mentioned it earlier. It's a government-backed insurance scheme that's all about making sure that if you're at flood risk, that insurance isn't unaffordable to you. So it pulls the flood risk element of insurance together, and insurance companies buy that insurance, they insure the insurers, as it were. They also have something called the Build Back Better scheme, which offers up to £10,000 to make property flood resilience adaptations to your home as part of your insurance claim. Yeah, it can take a long time for the insurance industry to catch up to changes, so your insurer might not take part, but it's worth doing your research, and there's a directory there. Okay, next slide, sorry. Yeah, reporting flooding. A lot of people can be reluctant to report flooding. Understandably, they can be worried about insurance and selling houses and things like that. But ultimately, insurers will use their own flood maps, and insurance can go up for other reasons like cost of living. Also, when you're selling a house, it's illegal not to declare that it's flooded. So it's vital to report flooding. In an incident, it helps us to prioritise our resources, not just us, but everyone who's responding to a flooding incident. And importantly, it's about capturing the true cost of floods. So every time we flood, it helps add to that picture. Next slide, sorry. Okay, yeah, what to do after a flood? Contact your insurance company as soon as possible. Keep good records before clearing up, and follow your insurer's advice. There's obviously a lot more advice that I can say. I've got more materials over there if you want to talk to me. And look after your health. So next slide. On that note, looking after your health. So as well as property damage, flooding can have serious mental health impacts. Add on top of that, dealing with insurers. And the recovery phase of flooding, recovering from a flood can go on for a long time. It can go on for months, it can go on for years. So it's really important to look after your health in that time, especially if anyone's relying on you. And there's support available. I've just put 2 examples up there, Bath Mind and the Bath Council Talking Therapies, but there's other Samaritans, things like that. Next slide. Yeah, okay, so you'll be happy to know I'm wrapping up now. So yeah, people have long settled on rivers for trade and water supplies. The Chew was once dotted with mills. Chew Magna was once at the centre of a medieval wool industry that attracted loads of rich traders, and that was all built around the mill. The Chew Valley was important to the Bristol brass industry. But now we live on rivers because they're beautiful, fulfilling places to be. And I think case studies like the Chew, I'm going to say them again, the Chew Magna flood group, are a prime example of how we can live with our flood risk in a way that means we can recover quicker with lower impacts. Having strong community ties increases your access to social support, and it just improves your ability to bounce back from disasters. And I'm just going to come back to say, knowledge of flood risk, forecasting, warning, the close partnership we have between communities and other authorities here has come on, and the Property Flood Resilience Scheme means that Chew's in a much better position than it was in 1968 and even since the 2012 floods. But flood risk, as I said, it's not just the likelihood of it happening, it's the impact it could have. So be prepared, reduce the impact, and in a way reduce your risk. Head to gov.uk/flood to get all the stuff I talked about. And I just thought I'd say thanks to the River Chew website, because I don't know who that is, and I don't know whether they were going to be in the room, but I got a lot of the history stuff on that, so thanks.
Right, so we've had a wide-ranging topic, very wide-ranging. that we've had quite a doom and gloom and global story from Jim Dale. Thank you for that.
It's okay. That's how it is.
And then Joseph's brought things closer to home. We've gone through from 1968 onwards and looked at everything that's been going on. Some positive light at the end of the tunnel from Simon, and then back to some nuts and bolts again to Joseph. So Q&A time, and thank you for your interjection as well, Dan, in the centre there. So I'm sure there must be some questions about this, and if you could show your hands then. The advice is to speak into the end of the microphone.
I can't.
Like that, Maggie. So
Okay.
Maggie, yes, you're first.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It's really helpful and informative. We've heard a lot this evening about collecting data and preparing for and dealing with flooding, providing advice and solutions to flooding. But it's almost like you've accepted the situation. What about dealing with the causes of flooding? Emissions are still rising. Fossil fuel companies are carrying on their business as usual. The government is giving go-ahead to the third runway at Heathrow. Airports are expanding. They've cut the budget drastically that they promised in their manifesto for sustainability. And I'm just interested to know perhaps what Jim could suggest that we can do, that can empower us to take action to prevent flooding. You know, but this evening it's all been about dealing with flooding. So come on, you know, what about stopping that happening?
It's a very good question. What can we do as individuals or collectively, as a country, as a world? And some parts of the world are going backwards as we're trying to push forwards. We know that. We've got, as I've mentioned previously, we've got a party of 4 in the House of Commons who steer backwards for the same reasons in terms of their connections to the fossil fuel industry. I think it starts with you personally, because this is where you're going to get your greatest fulfillment. That you've got to educate yourself, inform yourself about what are your greatest risks. We've talked a lot about the floods, but you know full well there are other aspects of climate change, other aspects of extreme weather that go far beyond floods. So you need to be aware of what to do in these situations. And to be frank, once you start to do that, your neighbour does it as well. You inform them. This is, as I say, it becomes a collective thing. You don't just feel good about it, but you feel safer with it. So if you know what to do when a storm approaches, a windstorm for example, if you know what to do when it's a heat wave like 2022 and people are potentially dying around you, particularly infirm and elderly, that's the sort of message that I would give. It is an education, without a shadow of a doubt, and that is my one thing now that's left on my plate to do, is to go and educate people, to try my best to come up with this thing I talked about, which is the qualification, the course and the qualification in terms of dealing with all aspects of severe, extreme type weather, because the bigger picture, in all its horribleness, will not end with you on your own. It has to be a collective thing. So for now, it seems a selfish thing, but you do what's best for yourself in your own environment, in your own house, inform those around you, make sure yourself, and then knock that on to your neighbour, to your family, whoever it happens to be. That's my answer to this, that we've got to move. And by the way, the government have got to start to put public information films out, as we saw some time ago in previous life, if you like, about deep water and the spectre hanging over it saying children keep away from water, the things that went out with COVID. It has to be similar with what's going forward as far as climate change and extreme weather, and what we can do about that, particularly when we get into a heat wave and or a flood situation. So that's the sort of pathway. It's not doom and gloom quite, because this is self-help. And I hope that that answers some of the concerns that you've got.
Well, you said, I said, it's more of a self-help. You need help from central government, you need local authorities to get involved. There's, you know, the rivers are flooding, and it's as plain as day. A blind man can see a river's flooding. You don't need the Environment Agency putting out warnings. If you live near a river, you can see it flooding.
Yeah.
And you need, what I've heard today is all reaction. You know, you want to be proactive. What are you going to do about it? How are you going to solve it? Who's going to take responsibility? All you get is the Environment Agency blaming the council blaming local authority, and it just goes round and round in circles.
Yeah, and do you know what?
When you see a flooding, especially say Salford, this is the area I know, there's no help, there's no one there, the roads flood, the banks are falling down, no one cares a two hoots about it.
I could encapsulate what you're saying by saying we're perhaps fiddling on the margins.
Yeah,
that's about where we are with it. And there's a good reason for it, and that is we are very small. The human race is very small when it comes to extreme weather. And if you want to look at that in its fullness, then just look at one of the richest places in the world, okay, just a few months ago, LA, and what that did to people perhaps with far more ability to be able to look after themselves.
It's not something new at Forest Fire. They've had earthquakes everywhere around the world, suffers these things.
No, but listen, the intensity of them and the number of them is increasing all the time simply because of the temperature that's been put into the fossil fuels that have been put into the atmosphere, the greenhouse effect that's been caused by that. You've learned about that in school, for God's sake. This is not rocket science. This is very simple science that we have to get through to those that don't want to know and those that go against it, which is why I go on places like GB News, etc., to fight the Tices and the Farages. That's exactly what I'm here for, and I'll continue to do it because we have to shun those people. We have to show them up for what they are. And MP Watch needs to look necessarily beyond the MP itself and into these other people, the reform guys, etc.
You need someone to do some action.
Yeah.
Until you get action. From 1968 onwards, the river in Salford, the Rivers Authority employed people on boats to dredge the river. What you get is someone coming along and saying, well, that's no good, you're just pushing the problem down. The problem you've got is because you haven't done it for 40 years, you're going to have to dredge the river all from Wiltshire right down to Bristol, Avon, right down to the Channel Sea, because you've left it for 40 years.
Yeah.
Dredging isn't going to be the answer for all of our works.
It worked after 1968 because it solved the problem in River Avon and Shallows and Mid-Lane for a period of about 10 years, and then you quit, you put in the people, and then what happens? It silts up, you drain, you clear the drains, you overflow the river, and it's easy to see. It's as plain as day. There's too much volume water going through a small channel. Until you dredge it, you ain't going to get anywhere.
And there happens to be a weir not far down from that location, so the water would actually back up.
No, it goes straight over a weir. The weir doesn't exist.
And it raises the water into the floodplain on the right-hand bank through Salford.
You're talking when it does it the right-hand side.
Just allow a little stream to respond.
And the amount of water that's going down the river in a normal flow is what, about 4 or 5 cubic meters of water. In a flood flow, it's about 400 cubic meters per second going down the river. Where's that going to go? The water does go and spill out. You can't dig that channel big enough to go and ever be able to manage those types of flows. It will need to spill out. It needs to connect into the floodplains. That's what rivers are designed to do.
The floodplain won't hold it, Salford. It floods the whole field.
Yeah, but that is the floodplain.
That is it, yeah, but it's
overwhelm
the floodplain.
No,
we need to do something more.
We do not overwhelm the floodplain.
Do?
Because the floodplain is as far as the river would like to go. So the floodplain is only the geography of the land that creates the actual boundary of the floodplain. So it's not overwhelmed. The water just passes downstream.
And how come we never had a problem from 1970 to 1985?
And that's only just down to the amount of water that's gone down the river at that time. We haven't done maintenance of that.
You haven't done any maintenance in 50 years. I've seen nothing.
The Avon is essentially a bunch of buckets, each with their own capacity. And because of the weirs, you clear that sill, it will then return to that same level, because that weir defines the level that the sill goes up to, and the rest is washed down. And so the key thing is there, dredging is like using a very expensive spoon to clear that out, and then it fills back up again. And if you compare the size of that bucket to the size of the floodplain, it's...
by doing nothing, you're reducing the volume of that bucket.
So
you see the silt in Bristol,
we spend a lot of money
in the river,
on little benefit. And as you said, as Paul was saying, it's down to the amount of water, and we need to think bigger when it comes to the bigger order of events.
Could I just come in on this point?
Yes,
because, you know, I just want to reflect on a couple of things. Number one, about what can we do. One of the things I think was missing from the film was about our diets, and how we think about our protein, where our protein comes from, and that links back to land use. I've come back to the UK after working in Latin America from 2015, and I've actually seen firsthand what happens where our soy comes from and the full-scale, deforestation that's happening there. I've spent 4 years in Brazil. We work with Bristol Avon Rivers Trust. My name is Matthew Smith. I work for Avonese Trees. And one of the most informative things that I've done is actually had a walk around the land with this gentleman at the end. And we're working on a landscape recovery project. EA are involved with it, and you're actually one of our signatories. And this is working in the Lower Chew Valley. It's working with farmers. It's taking a joined-up approach. And this is a way in which DEFRA are mobilising subsidy money and working with ecologists, working with landowners, working with ENGOs to look at how we strategically design interventions which are paid for not just by public subsidies. One of my roles is to actually look at how those benefits flow out into, for example, supply chain. So who are buying the raw products? So we're working with commercial dairy farms, we're working with beef farms. So there's a link to Tesco's, to Waitrose, who have a vested interest in the raw products that come out of these landscapes. So there are things being done. It is slowly coming together. And I think another really key point is to consider is around, it's not just about the flooding, it's about cooling the temperatures. When we're changing how we look at the land, we're actually cooling those microclimates. We plant a lot of trees, but we're also creating spaces for people to actually engage with nature. So, it's thinking about how do we create these safe spaces for future climate where people can escape potential future heat waves. And just one other final point, which I keep noticing when I come into these meetings of informed and concerned people, is it's generally the older generation that are here representing all of the UK. And what worries me is, I'm 42, 43, okay, where it'd be great if, I understand it's late for perhaps young children, but where are your kids, where are the grandkids? Because we need the 20-year-olds, the 30-year-olds, because they're the next ones that are coming along, and it concerns me that generation seems to be, looking at the world through a screen and not necessarily engaging in a community. So, I really would ask people to think about how you mobilise your own families or the younger members of your communities to come out and get involved and really understand what it means for their children and for beyond the future generations. Because you're 100% correct. It's like we're staring down the barrel of a climate gun, and it's about, well, it is already going off. And I've seen it. Most of Brazil, southern Brazil, was underwater because of deforestation. They're waking up, and with things like landscape recovery and the landowners in this area, the rest of the world are watching the UK and seeing how we're working to reconfigure our systems, our food systems, our landscapes, and learn from us. So the things are happening, and I think we're in a really good position as a country to show the world how it can be done, but it does need communities and mobilisation.
Thank you, Matthew. Thanks for your work. And I know that you're still looking for volunteers to come and help with that work, so if you feel like you'd like to volunteer and plant a few trees, do speak to Matthew. It's a really big project that they've got on just south of Compton Dando. It's the latest one, but there's a lot of work going on, and it will make a difference in the same way that we've talked about with the work that Bristol Avon Rivers Trust. So, like that.
Thank you. This was mostly for Simon. I was really interested in the work you're doing on the nature-based solutions and slowing the water and getting the sediment out of it. But I was just curious, you sort of mentioned with the bunted scrapes that they would allow the sediment to fall out. So I was just wondering, do you ever have to clear those out or create new ones?
That's all I am, I'm on. Great question. So the great thing about nature-based solutions is that the project involves careful design so that you minimise the amount of maintenance that's required. But then in doing the project that I just showed you, where you're storing valuable topsoil, the farmer scrapes it out once a year and reapplies it to his field. So that soil that he was losing before and losing valuable harvests essentially is being provided for him in one spot where he can simply scoop and reapply. So actually it's a win-win. And through that project as well, I think where you improve drainage of that particular field, you wet your margins and the ponds fill up, sediment drops out. The rest of the field actually drains much better. So his productivity, right up to the buffer strip that we created, is 100 times better than it was before, simply because his land's draining better. So all in all, if you can build that maintenance and make it a real positive for the landowner in this instance, it becomes future-proof. And that's about the only bit of maintenance that needs to be done, really, and it is literally once a year.
Hi. Hello. Hey. First of all, I was really interested in that point that you made about the world is watching the UK. I mean, that's not something I have believed up until now. We're such a small country in a big world that's making a big mess, and so on. So what makes you say that we are being closely watched?
One of the benefits of coming out of the EU allowed us to move away from the common agricultural policy and think more strategically about how we deliver public goods with public money. So there was a movement that was started by Her Majesty's Treasury called the Natural Capital Committee. And this brought together a whole range of scientists, economists, ecologists that looked at how we manage our land for the economy. So natural capital is a concept that looks at the environment as an asset which delivers value. And when I say value, not just money, it means well-being, about everyone that's talking here. And this thinking has really evolved within the UK. There are other countries that are playing with it, but we really were the forerunners for it. That comes from a piece of work that came out called the UK National Ecosystem Assessment. And what that did is it came up with various scenarios about how we manage the land in the UK and what that management will look like in terms of future impacts. So we've taken it from a concept into government, and now they're actually putting it into practice by taking public money and thinking, rather than just paying a farmer per hectare, it's about how do you think strategically about what you're paying that farmer to do, not just to protect their land, it's to protect the waterways, it's to protect their neighbouring land. And it's a very new way of actually diverting public money to do that. On top of that, what the government has charged us, and there's 55 other projects in England doing this, they're saying, how do you then mobilise money from the private sector? So we already spoke about flood re. The insurance companies are going to have to pay out huge sums of money in future if they don't support nature-based solutions. The supply chain, our food supply chains will be completely decimated if we don't think about how do we share and spare the land. We can't just put it all under the plough. We can certainly graze, we can certainly grow crops, but how do we think about where do we, I don't like rewild, but how do we bring nature back in and those natural processes which make our landscapes more resilient? And the UK really is leading the way at this. The European Union are watching very closely how landscape recovery lands. Well, North America was, I'm not quite sure now under the current administration. Latin America certainly is very, very interested in it. I've done a lot of work in Chile, in vineyards, they're looking at it. The forestry there is a big, big part of their GDP, alongside copper. They have huge forest fires in Chile, and we've been showing how you can think strategically about reforestation, which provides natural fire breaks. So the big forestry companies now are thinking, we're not just going to reforest, where do we put it? And it starts to make business sense. And it's about bringing nature onto the balance sheet. It's not, nature is just a cost, nature is a benefit to the business and society.
Well, thanks especially if you're working the vineyards in Chile.
I don't even drink alcohol, but there we are. Completely altruistic.
But going back to the starting point, the fact that the world may be watching us and the initiatives that we can invent and develop gives me greater heart. I think we can have a bigger impact in the world by being better at looking after ourselves within our own country, within our own boundaries, simply because the world is watching and think, well, if they're doing it, we can do it. So we could have a huge impact from that. Can I just change the subject a bit? I want to ask a question of the Environment Agency. When it comes to the amount of information that you have talking about the risks of flooding, and specifically being able to get it down to a limited number of houses in postcodes and the like, do you target those people in those houses, and do you encourage them to develop their own action plans, as you've been describing this evening, and their recovery plans and so on?
By your question, I think you're talking about community action plans rather than individual properties.
Well, I was thinking of personal ones actually, where, if you're going to going back to some of the points that have been raised generally here, we need to have action from people, individuals, and so on. So if there are people who are living in a high flood risk neighbourhood, and they are simply unaware of the risk and oblivious to what they could do to help themselves either avoid floods, avoid or reduce the damage of floods, and to recover from a flood if they have one, and they're just not doing that at all, you have the opportunity, you know who those people are, you know who those houses, you can target them.
So, like everything we do, it's prioritisation, and each year our team has to look at what's the best use of our time, and we have access to that information, obviously. And there's a lot of challenges going into each year. I mean, our operational area, as I said, Dorset, Wiltshire, Somerset, and that includes big conurbations, Bristol. I think that's a massive challenge. Is the Bristol Froome has loads of properties at risk, many in communities that don't have any time to spend thinking about this. And very different demographics to, not to presume, but very different demographics to Tube Valley, for example. That gives us a challenge. On top of that, our team's always chasing recovery engagement. And as I said, 2023 to 2024, wettest water year on record. We're constantly having to go into communities and talk to them, and we're seeing new communities, communities that haven't flooded in recent memory, and it's important to capitalise on that. When they flood, that's our opportunity to be there and get those messages across. But I think that's why we have to work closely with. We're not using them, but we have to work closely with Baines and in some of the other counties, some of the other authorities that are like Somerset, they have the Somerset Rivers Authority. And it's all about making sure that we're all beating the same drum and we all use the same resources.
Well, we work together. We recently had several Baines prepared events. We had one in this room a couple of years back. We were in Salford, and we do invite all communities into an area, and we try to see many people on one occasion rather than going out to individuals, because that's the best way to get our message as wide as possible. That we want to speak to everyone, and if we could speak to individuals, then great, but realistically we don't have that resource to do that individually. We want to get to the widest audience, and hopefully the word of mouth will get it wider from that. Does that answer your question?
We do publish flood maps.
Yes, we do.
So people can see those, and then you a very clear message about registering your interest with flood warning service, and you have the forms on there to fill in for a personal flood plan. So it's quite well presented.
Thanks, Clive.
and just point out that for this meeting, every single parish council and Keynsham Town Council was circulated with the information about this meeting. So they're, the hub of each community, as well as wider publicity. So if people, I see what you mean about individuals being targeted. I think that's a challenge, but in each community, the parish council could ensure that their community are fully aware.
I was just going to say that we have Check Your Long-Term Flood Risk, which is a new programme which you can actually tell what your flood risk is. But yes, Lynn probably official. Yeah. Just yours.
Yeah. This flood community coordinator.
Flood coordinator is not like it sounds. I think in Chew we're between a river and brook. The brook is a flash flooding brook, so within, we say, an hour, it's too difficult for the school to evacuate. So you have to be really quick in getting out. And I think after the 2012 floods, we all stood around in horror at what was happening, and nobody really knew what to do. And after that, we decided that we had to put together a plan, because we're quite isolated there, and by the time properties are flooding, nobody can get in to help us. So you just have to do it yourself. And that's what we did. We devised, amazing people in Magna came forward to be neighbourhood flood wardens. So it's not a top-down thing. It's people living near their neighbours and knowing who the vulnerable people are. And that could be somebody whose husband is away and has to put up boards and has got a couple of kids. They know their own people, so they're in little clusters all over the village. The other thing that we had was we had a flood phone. We have one phone with a number. That is the phone that we talk to the wardens to, but also the Environment Agency, Baines, police, fire, all know that if they need to contact us, that's the phone. Because if I'm not there as a coordinator, somebody else is, and they're holding that phone. And that was almost an accidental thing, because I didn't want to use my own phone, but it's actually proved really helpful, not least in COVID, when it became the emergency phone. We're on the move all the time. What I would say is that when you start like this, you get involved with these guys, and all of a sudden you're finding that you're doing a natural flood management footpath to stop the school flooding. You're linking in with Baines. We've had fantastic, the lovely Dan Parr is here, who has been amazingly helpful for Chew. Tell them what you are. You're the
Principal Drainage Engineer at Battle of Somerset Council.
Everybody will be on your back. But we can be flooded. I'm going to say this actually, that the road flooding is as important now to us as the property flooding. We've sort of sorted the property flooding, but the road flooding is just dreadful, and that's where the drainage team come in, because we can be cut off completely. So yeah, we're evolving all the time. The one thing that has made a huge difference is social media, because now, to begin with, we had to do like a cascade. I would phone 3 people, they would phone 3 people, but now you just WhatsApp everybody. And my hope now is that with the telemetry devices that we've got here, which you can read on your phone, you don't have to go out in the middle of the night, you can read on your phone, that everybody will become personally more resilient. So it's not being cosseted by the wardens, it's actually people being able to be resilient themselves and filling in these forms. They don't fill in the forms, but they do often make a note in their notebooks. The other thing that I've got involved in recently is an online diagnostic tool, which is for organisations to actually look at their risk and measure it, and they get a report back, and then it links them to equipment and resources that they might need, provided by people like Communities Prepared. So out of this little acorn, big things have grown, and we've expanded and expanded. I don't know if that helps.
That's great. Thank you. That's very much. Paul.
Thank you. I have to confess to a degree of naivety, because when I saw the title of this talk, there was an issue about what has changed since 1968, and I wasn't expecting to hear that your science and communication systems have improved, and that was about it. But the question is different. When you look at a river from its headwater right to the sea, and you think about ways you're going to engineer changes in flood risk, my guess is at the upper reaches of the river you're trying to slow water down, and towards the sea you're trying to speed it up. That's a guess. I mean, I think that's what you're implying. So if we look at the River Chew in its entirety from the headwaters down to it meeting the River Avon, is it all holding back, or is there a point in the middle where we start speeding it up?
The River Chew, it's, the geography does mean that in the upper reaches it's a very steep catchment, and then when it goes through the Chew Valley Lake, and then after that it becomes a lot flatter, so it will slow down. And we do use natural flood management to slow the river down, and let it basically connect into its floodplains. That does alleviate flooding for properties downstream. So it's actually the geography of the location that means that the risk is there. And economically, we can't just put lots and lots of money at something if we're not going to get benefits from it. There was a proposal back in the late 90s, and it just wasn't, basically so £3 million short of the monies that we could attract for it, and we could see that it would only give marginal benefits. So we couldn't attract the money to do it, and then it needed an extra £3 million to actually be put into there. Whereas by employing PLR and those types of measures and using our analysis, we have actually managed to get the most economically viable solution for Chew Magna. We kept its character as well, because we could have possibly had to put in, to implement that, put in some concrete walls and completely changed its character. So there is that aspect as well. It's sympathetic development. The Environment Agency are very keen for sustainable development. We're not against any type of development, just want to be sustainable, and that's always the challenges that we put forwards. And we get involved with any of these developments, planning or whatever. So
if I could paraphrase
yes,
what you're saying, that the Chew Valley is more important to be holding floodwater back to protect Bristol.
No, that's not what I've said. I've looked at the communities along that area and whether any interventions, any hard grey engineering interventions would have made any benefits to those communities. And after that analysis, we found that it wouldn't.
So when it comes to flood risk in Bristol, the Chew is, the Chew is a drop in the ocean, like compared to the Bristol Avon, and also the tide. That's the biggest thing when it comes to flood risk in Bristol.
Okay, well, therefore, why have you stopped clearing all the debris out of the lower part of the Chew?
Because that's a riparian responsibility. We've modelled the site, we know we've modelled the river, we know we actually only do maintenance on small sections of the river, which we use our permissive powers. The actual first people who are responsible for maintenance of every river is actually the riparian owner, and that's why we have permissive powers.
Okay, we'll take a couple more.
Thank you.
Dave.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentations. They've been wonderful. It wouldn't be good democracy if we didn't have hard questions, and thank you for your excellent answers. We really appreciate it. I didn't want anybody, Keynsham residents, to go away. So David Leverton, I'm a Bates Council and a town councillor. I didn't want anybody to go away from this thinking that we didn't have a community resilience group in Keynsham, because we've spent a great deal of time looking at the fantastic work that's been done in the Chew Valley. We do have a very good community resilience group. We met with the Environment Agency only last month. We met with Baines only last month, and we're currently looking for volunteers. So, should any of you feel moved in the right direction, please call in at the Town Council offices, and thank you to those of you that know our local Wombles group for those people, many people that have volunteered. But if you'd like to volunteer yourself, just pop along to the Town Council offices and we'd love to have you on board. Thank you.
Can I suggest you offer cake?
You've not beaten my cake.
Thanks. It's just a really quick one, just picking up on Simon's point earlier. So I'm a leader at local Keynsham Scouts, and I plan sessions for the Beavers. So ask for Jim really. Jim, your video at the big start was really powerful. Is it accessible on the internet? Am I able to get a copy at all? Be something really good material for taking to one of our
If you email
sessions.
me, I can send it to you. That's probably, or even David for that
Okay.
answer. There's no problem there. It is, as you can probably tell, 8 months old, so it needs updating in terms of some of the figures. I mentioned that they got worse, not better. So it just adds gravity to what it is.
That'd be great. Yeah, it'd be fantastic.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks.
Hi, yes. We often in Keynsham get lots of flooding where, you know, with the way the Chew meets the Avon, and they're both backing up, and it goes into the park, and then we get all sorts of debris. And as a Womble, I can tell you, there's a lot of sewage gets deposited into the. Every time it floods, there's a lot of sewage, and I just wondered, these water companies, how far they are accountable, if at all, to the Environment Agency, and what the interaction is between you guys and the water companies, sewage companies.
Well, firstly, we're not the ideal people to ask. We're from the flood risk management department.
Could you please move the microphone closer to you?
Sorry, is that better? Is that?
Yeah.
Yes, from the flood risk management department. I'd be more than happy to take that question away and find out more for you. I mean, at the moment, we're currently going through a big criminal case with the water companies, and all the information about that can be found on gov.uk. When information is allowed to be published about that, it's updated on that blog. But yes, sorry, that's not the best answer, but I'd be happy to take that question away.
I think that's a topic for another public meeting, another time. If there are any other public meetings that you'd like us to organise, then contact us and give us a list.
Just a very small point regarding landscape recovery. If you Google Avon Niche trees and go onto our website, we have a consultation open which is asking the local community what they would like to see landscape recovery look like in their area. So I would encourage you to go on there and engage. That's what I want to say.
I'll get to Amanda's question, Mr. Singleton.
Mine's a quick one for Simon. Are beavers a natural-based solution?
Well, a simple answer to that is they're landscape architects, and essentially if we look at headwater restoration, and we're looking at some of the data that's coming from some of the rivers, like the River Otter in Devon, there's evidence to suggest that they can help in this equation. They were part of it for millennia. They are on the Chew. We don't know how many, but they're prolific, I think, and they're expanding across the Bristol Avon. So they are part of a resilient landscape, and we've all got to work with them now as part of the projects that we're designing, the land that we manage. We have to work with them. They're protected species, and yeah, they could help the resilience in terms of that flood risk aspect, but also I think we haven't really touched on it today, but drought. There's not enough water in our catchments to sustain the growing populations. So having beavers and natural processes in our landscape allows our soils to infiltrate more water, which recharges our aquifers. Bristol Water need that water in our aquifers to feed the nation, or at least Bristol. So as part of that wider framework, they are a really important species that could have a really positive impact. Not sure yet. I don't know if they can sing. I've seen one wave at me as you walk by. That's about it.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to call it a close there. I'd like to thank our guest speakers, Jim Dale, Simon Hooper, I'm sorry, mental one. Joseph. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. It would be remiss of me not to point out the second line of this. If you are able to make a donation to cover our costs, that would be much appreciated. And if you want to know more about MP Watch, and come and join our group, there's an email address there. It's quite easy. MP Watch, North East Somerset and Hanham, that's the abbreviation, nesh@gmail.com. Thank you for your time. 9:20. That's not too bad. Safe journey home. And if you want to know more about the 1968 floods, there's a great archive piece on the Keynsham Town Community Radio website, and also the Channel 5 programme that Jim was part of is still available online if you look for that. So thank you and good night.